There's a certain myth in Hollywood that fame fades with age. But what happens when the spotlight returns after decades in the shadows? When an actor over 70 commands the stage again, not with nostalgia, but with raw, undeniable brilliance. These are the stories of stars who didn't just endure, but triumphed. Late, luminous, and unforgettable. The reluctant revivalist. Christopher Plummer's perfect timing. Christopher Plummer spent decades building a career that spanned Shakespearean theatre, historical epics, and nuanced character work. Yet for much of the public, he remained indelibly linked to Captain Georg von Trapp in The Sound of Music. It was a film he privately called The Sound of Mucus, a role he found charmingly one-dimensional compared to the complexity he craved as an actor. Plummer was a classically trained performer who shared the stage with Laurence Olivier and played King Lear more times than he could count. He wanted to be known for more than a musical he made in his 30s. Then, at 82, he finally got the defining moment he had long sought, not as a romantic hero or a Shakespearean monarch, but as Hal Fields in Beginners, 2010. A gentle, aching portrait of a man who comes out as gay after the death of his wife and embraces life anew in his final years. Plummer's performance was quiet, luminous, and full of unexpected joy. There was no grandstanding, just deep humanity. He made vulnerability elegant, one critic observed. Another dubbed it an autumnal revelation, a phrase that seemed to capture not just the role, but the man himself. Plummer's legacy is a reminder that greatness doesn't always roar. It can also arrive softly, with gravitas tempered by humility. He waited a lifetime to be truly seen, and when he was, he glowed like a man who had never once doubted his own worth. Us great, the ageless anarchist George Burns steals the century. George Burns had been a household name for half a century before he ever held an Oscar. As one half of the legendary comedy duo Burns and Allen, he charmed radio listeners and television viewers with his deadpan delivery, dry wit, and impeccable timing. When his beloved wife and stage partner Gracie Allen died in 1964, many assumed his career would fade into sentimental memory. Burns was already in his 60s, and though he continued performing, the golden age of vaudeville and variety seemed far behind him. Then came The Sunshine Boys, 1975, a Neil Simon-penned film about two aged vaudevillians forced to reunite after decades of bitter estrangement. Burns hadn't acted in a movie in 36 years. The role had originally gone to his friend Jack Benny, who passed away before filming began. Burns stepped in with a mix of hesitation and instinct. "I knew that guy," he said simply of his character, "because I was that guy." He played Al Lewis, a retired comic with a cranky shell and a tender heart, and he nailed it. The result? An Oscar for Best Supporting Actor at the age of 80. Burns became the oldest winner in that category at the time, and more than that, a cultural phoenix. Suddenly, George Burns wasn't just a nostalgic figure from a bygone era. He was funny, vital, and somehow ageless. "Timing," he said in countless interviews, "is everything, especially in comedy and cardiology." By the time George Burns passed away at 100, he had outlived most of his contemporaries and even some of his imitators. But more than just enduring, he remained relevant, funny, and inspiring until the end. He showed the world that a late start could still be the beginning of something extraordinary. That laughter doesn't wrinkle, and neither does charm. The comeback queen, Jessica Tandy's blossoming glory. At 80, Jessica Tandy won the Academy Awards for Best Actress for her role in Driving Miss Daisy. She'd spent much of her career in theater, often overshadowed on screen by younger starlets. But in 1989, she gave a performance that would etch her into cinematic history. As the aging Southern matron, opposite Morgan Freeman's quiet chauffeur, Tandy offered a layered portrait of stubborn dignity, melting into trust and affection. The role was quiet, but seismic. Critics praised her restraint. Audiences adored her. Tandy's voice, quivering but resolute, carried the weight of generations. She once said, "It takes a long time to become young," quoting Picasso. And suddenly, youth wasn't the prize anymore. The cinematic philosopher, Eli Wallach's final bow. Known for his roles in spaghetti westerns and classic dramas, Eli Wallach didn't slow down after 70. He sped up. Though he never won a competitive Oscar, the Academy honored him with a Lifetime Achievement Award at 94, praising a body of work that defied categorization and expectation. His role in The Holiday at 90 charmed audiences, particularly a monologue about Hollywood's golden age that felt more like autobiography than fiction. In the movies, we have leading ladies and we have best friends, his character said. You, I can tell, are a leading lady. Wallach's cadence. That mix of Brooklyn grit and Shakespearean thunder never lost its edge. He kept acting until his final years, each performance a quiet rebellion against erasure. The elegant contrarian, Shirley MacLaine's second spotlight. By the time Shirley MacLaine turned 70, many assumed her boldest roles were behind her. Then came a cascade of late career triumphs, including an Emmy win for These Old Broads and nominations for her work in Downton Abbey and Bernie. MacLaine has always been more than an actress. She's a mystic, a memoirist, a dancer with steel in her spine. In Bernie, she played a small-town matriarch, both terrifying and pitiful, crafting a character that lingered like perfume in a closed room. Reflecting on aging, she once said, "It's not about getting older. It's about becoming more of who you really are." For MacLaine, awards were never the destination, but they certainly made satisfying milestones. The benevolent force. James Earl Jones's reverberating honor, known for his thunderous baritone, the voice of Darth Vader, the king in The Lion King. James Earl Jones was awarded an honorary Oscar at age 80. Though he'd been nominated before, this was the Academy finally acknowledging a titan. Jones had conquered Broadway, film, and television. His presence was at once gentle and mighty. The honorary award cited his legacy of consistent excellence and uncommon versatility. In interviews, Jones often spoke of his childhood stutter and how acting gave him a voice. Literally and metaphorically, he turned silence into power. The honor at 80 wasn't overdue. It was simply well-earned. The chameleonic visionary. Gena Rowlands' quiet coronation. In 2015, at 85, Gena Rowlands received an honorary Oscar, crowning a career that had always danced just outside mainstream recognition. Most remembered for her collaborations with husband John Cassavetes, Rowlands brought emotional ferocity to the screen long before it was fashionable. In A Woman Under the Influence, she portrayed unraveling domesticity with such raw realism that critics were stunned into reverence. Decades later, she played the older Allie in The Notebook, bringing tenderness and devastation to the portrayal of dementia. Receiving the Oscar, she said simply, "Acting is my soul." That soul had lit art house screens and influenced generations, all without ever chasing the spotlight. In a business obsessed with youth, these late-life triumphs stand as rare but powerful exceptions. Statistically, only around 10% of Oscar acting nominations go to performers over 70. And wins? Even fewer. But perhaps that's changing, slowly. Streaming platforms and international cinema have created fresh venues for veteran actors. Performers once sidelined by age are now sought after for depth, nuance, and lived experience. The spotlight is expanding, and it's catching the glint of silver hair and seasoned souls. Picture George Burns lighting a cigar with a grin that defied mortality. Hear Jessica Tandy's voice tremble as she says, "You're my best friend." Feel Eli Wallach's hand on your shoulder, reminding you that every story matters. James Earl Jones whispering, "Remember who you are." Gena Rowlands laughing through tears. Christopher Plummer leaning into a role with the weight of a lifetime. Hal Holbrook's eyes locked on the horizon. Shirley MacLaine dancing past doubt. Each moment a lesson in patience, persistence, and power. Not relics, but revelations. Legends aren't born. They ripen. If you enjoyed this journey through the twilight glories of cinema, tap like, subscribe for more, and tell us, which legendary performance moved you the most?